Welcome to the Wordy Pair Podcast, your go-to hub for all things writing, world building, and the occasional dive into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We're breaking down the barriers between you and your next great story. Whether you're a seasoned scribe or just scribbling your first sentences, we've got something for you. We'll be discussing everything from crafting compelling characters to dissecting the good, the bad, and the downright bizarre in the world of fiction. Okay, this script says you guys are eccentric. Isn't that just a 3-syllable word for weird? No offense. So, whether you're in need of inspiration, a good laugh, or just a couple of weirdos to keep you company on your writing journey, you're in the right place. Thanks for tuning in to the Wordy Pair Podcast.
Hello and welcome, everybody. It is the Wordy Pair Podcast that you are listening to right now. And we're going to talk about random stuff today. As always, I'm Rudy.
I'm Justin.
And the only idea that I had for today's episode was that I was wandering around on Twitter like a fool. And I saw someone say that there's some kind of like a problem with fantasy races.
Do tell, because this sounded interesting.
No, it was just, I didn't click through and read the actual article, but this is one of those things that's been going on, we can't have fantasy races because insert stupid racist nonsense here.
Oh, one of them, like with the D&D orc situation?
Yeah, or just dwarves and elves and stuff, I don't know.
Let's think about how funny this was as a concept. I know that this has been pointed out by other people before, but let's seriously just nail this down.
Sure.
A group of people looked at orcs from Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
And thought, that's black people.
Right.
And then told everyone not to do it. Who's the bad guy here?
Then they turned them into Mexicans.
Wait, what?
Yeah, that's the thing that happened. You didn't see the image?
I don't... Wait, did I see that? No, I don't think
Wizards
I did.
of the Coast brought out this image. Hold on, we're going to have to...
Oh my god.
You're not going to see this...
Is Wizards of the Coast just like the most absolute racist company on the planet now? Like they're literally called Wizards. They're already at a bad start.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? That explains why I heard someone calling them Grand Wizards of the Coast earlier, and I didn't pick up on it.
It was this picture.
What?
Welcome to the new face of orcs.
Why in the world are these orcs, hanging out like the cowboys of Moo Mesa?
Because they're Mexican coded, according to the article that I took that image from.
Okay. This makes it so much worse, because it starts with someone looking at orcs and being reminded of black people.
Yeah.
And so their solution to the problem was to say, we need to make orcs more Latin representative? Is that...
That appears to be what happened, yes.
I don't think we have to take anything seriously from Wizards of the Coast as a company.
Let me just say that, looking at anything in a fantasy setting, and unless you're the author of that fantasy setting, saying that it is X-coded is something that I find incredibly stupid. No, not stupid necessarily, but presumptuous. It's more often a reflection of one's own failures in observation than the author's.
And it's not just that. This seems to be a projection thing.
Well, so, there's that too.
The people that are rallying in this manner, they're the ones that are looking at orcs and saying that's black people. In the same way how I'm sure you've observed, the people that are the first ones to say we need harsher gun control are the ones that are like, well, I can't trust myself with a gun. But so they project that onto everyone else. They're like, you couldn't possibly be responsible.
That's actually a very good point, yes.
Yeah. So this is, I can understand what you meant now when you said it made you vomit in your mouth a little bit. This image kind of, if this was an anime about orcs...
You could totally do this, right? But this is not being done as an organic outgrowth of the art. This is being done because some jerk said orcs equal black people, and then Dungeons and Dragons was like, well, we can't make orcs equal black people. Let's make them equal something. And then they came up with Mexicans, and like just the fact that they came out with something so distinctly Mexican is it's telling in like a very strange way that they're like, well, we'll just make orcs look like this, and then they're like, you realize that looks like people, like Mexican folk heroes, right? And they're like, what?
Yeah,
like their whole brain operates on a
system
of stereotypes that just repeats over and over again.
No, their brains operate on a system of stereotypes of which they have no understanding.
That's also true, yes.
Because it had to be pointed out to them. No, this is Mexican culture. What are you doing?
This looks suspiciously Mexican.
But just the more I dumb it down in my head,
literally Don Quixote.
Yeah.
And I know Don Quixote is Spanish. I'm making a joke.
The more I dumb it down in my head, the funnier it comes out. It's just like there's this little voice in my head that's like, you can't do that because those orcs are black people. And then D&D's response is like, oh, no,
they're not.
They're Mexican.
Well, it's very strange because, like, I don't know. When I'm writing, some new group or something like that, one of the things in my mind is to not make them like exactly like something that I know in real life, because then it's not fantasy anymore, right? Like,
right.
What's happening here is that there's like one element of the character group that they see and they latch onto it, and then they like start to like hunt for like more and more tenuous connections to the thing that they've already decided needs to be connected in their heads. And it just makes me want to make a story about orcs where they love watermelon and fried chicken.
The thing about it is, I'm looking at this picture,
but also salsa.
Well, you make a salsa bowl out of the watermelon rind.
Oh man, like a sweet salsa with like a mango salsa.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good idea.
And then we just push it to the back of the orc history that they actually used to have a lot of slaves.
That's sure we could do that too.
I don't get this. It's like, well, I get it, but
it's this constant perpetual like victimhoodness that everybody wants to be a part of. Apparently, like they're like, oh, I gotta identify with this victim group, and if I don't identify with this victim group, then I at least have to pretend to protect them from like the horror of having a fantasy race that shares like a stereotypical characteristic with them, because God forbid.
And all it is putting things in a box. I mean, I'm gonna go so far as to say that I do not think that people with this mindset could possibly be good writers, because they quite literally cannot think outside of these boxes. Well,
yeah,
they do not. I mean,
look at what they did. They took one set of stereotypes that were poorly matched, and then they basically took orcs and put them into a different box with a larger set of stereotypes that matched better. It's quite amazing, actually, when you think about it.
I mean, there's also a part of me that wonders if someone that works on these projects that actually has enough authority to say we're going in this direction is just so sick of this bullcrap that they're like, all right, we can't have the orcs that we've had for like 4 or 5 decades now. Fine, here's what we're gonna do. And he was the only person in the room smart enough to know exactly what was happening here. Maybe.
I mean, it's possible that there's someone working on the inside. My guess is that everyone...
This could be spite work.
Right. My guess, though, is that anyone who manages to stay inside Wizards of the Coast has long since been ejected from the company who had an original thought.
Yeah, that's kind of how it always goes in the companies like this. It's not so much people use the term get woke, go broke, but that's not what's really happening here. What's happening is you have this group of people that, I'm going to put this as nice as possible, they're talentless hacks.
Yeah.
And that is as nice as I can put it. And when you have an organization with talented people and a bunch of talented hacks that weasel their way into the inner workings of things, they start getting rid of the talented people because they are nothing but full of envy and jealousy, and they hate the fact that someone's better than them.
It's not even just the talented people. It's also the people that are like untalented but good workhorses.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
Anyone who can get things
anyone who
moving.
can actually get anything done goes off to the side.
It's like the pod people version of seeing traction and just pointing at it and shrieking.
They're not talentless hacks. They're like anti-talented. They like have the ability only to drive things into the dirt.
Yeah, I mean, I'm even looking at this and like it kind of looks like it was a real drawing, but it also has shades of AI in it. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't want to go that far and say that it's an AI picture, but it looks way more colorful than your typical Dungeons and Dragons motif, I guess.
Well, you can have, bright. There's a lot of different settings in Dungeons and Dragons. Some of them are darker than others. That's part of the interest of the setting, though, right? Is that there were a variety of places to go. Imagine like taking okay, like there are some really dark freaking settings in Dungeons and Dragons, like Dark Sun. I don't know much about Dark Sun, but I'm pretty sure that they still have rampant slavery and stuff like that. And imagine just like taking out all of the politically incorrect bits out of a setting because that's the way that it needs to be these days. When the setting was purposely designed to be dark and morally gray, if not morally dark gray. You know what I mean? Like we created this for a reason. There's a purpose to it, and the purpose to it is for there's multiple purposes to it, but like just to name two of them. Number one, to have a place for neutral or evil leaning characters to have campaigns, right? That'd be number one. I have a bunch of people that want to play evil characters, and they don't want to constantly be fighting against a bunch of royal paladins. They want to be evil, and they want to be around other evil characters, and they want to have a setting that has that kind of feel to it. Well, you'd pick something like Dark Sun, right? Or
Yeah.
you have the alternate possibility of like there's these good people that are going to try to bring a little bit of light to this dark place, and it's the fact that they're in a place where everything seems to automatically reject them makes it more interesting and more difficult for them because they have more work to do. And no, we just can't have these settings anymore because someone said a mean word at some point. It's really like it's discouraging in a very deep way,
Well, discouraging is the proper word. I mean, let's look at a few things here. First thing, there is such a thing as the thought experiment. So if you're
Sure.
looking at it in terms of writing, by removing all conflict from writing, it takes away a lot of the ability for the writer to propose thought experiments on the nature of right and wrong in stories.
Sure.
Another thing to think of is, this is supposed to be a company that is trying to make money by selling these campaign settings. Something that anyone can do sitting at their own personal computer or with a group of friends anytime they like. So there is not really much of a barrier of entry to this kind of product.
Right.
So it seems a flawed direction to go in to take everything that you have that is an established setting that people have been using for decades and therefore are drawn to it.
Right.
And then say, you know what, let's turn this... Like, what are you doing in this world with these Mexican orcs? You're like, you've got a group of heroes that are traveling to...
things. If someone told me that we're going to have, like, Mexican orcs, I'd be like, cool, all right. Desert planet, desert world, exploration... the difficulties of ranching. There've been a bajillion freaking Western stories that you could tweak into a D&D setting if you actually wanted to. But that's not what they're actually going to do. That's not how this is going to work.
I feel like what's really happening here is you've taken a source of conflict, i.e. orcs.
Yeah.
And you have made this into a situation where you have your party of heroes that are traveling to, say, some mountain fortress to examine some evil goings-on. And as they pass through these lands, all they run across are these friendly tribes of various monsters and orcs that at one time would have been trouble for them. And now it's just like, hey, we're going on a quest. Okay, cool, go on through. Here, have some meat pies and cookies on your way. Yeah. Except we don't have meat pies because we're all vegan orcs.
Yeah, well, we got to get rid of meat eating.
And then they just follow the party. The source of conflict is now the orcs following the party around trying to tell them about CrossFit. like you've got this giant orc, but he's like all withered and unhealthy looking because he's been eating nothing but like peanuts and soy for the last 3 years.
Right.
It's just like, oh my god, we're what do you call this valley, this centrally located valley on this continent? And they're like, we call it the West Coast. Welcome to San Fran, home of the Whopper. I don't know.
There's a role that you can do, right? Like.
No, I feel like if you were playing your characters in this world, all you would be doing is rolling for sanity. That's it. That's
right.
Every 5 seconds, you've got to make a roll for sanity because you're just like, what? I would prefer the world where the orcs are trying to eat me at this point because I don't know what is going on. Is that woman about to sing opera?
There's an important thing going on here too. Is that like this is not like a real life setting where like look, if it is perfectly reasonable for in a world where there are gods and demons vying for control over the universe, for some evil powerful being to create a race of things that have been distorted into a source of evil. Like this is something that everybody is fighting about, and like I don't quite understand why, in the sense that like well no, the orcs aren't all evil because they're like because they're quote unquote like it's very weird to me, because the whole point of the story is of the setting is to say that this evil god took beings and forged them into an engine of evil. That's the point. Like making them into like pastoral ranchers is you would need another god to do that, if you get my drift, right? Like there may be salvation for orcs at some point, but the issue is that it would take the same kind of divine intervention that caused them to become evil in the first place, right? Right? In Tolkien, right? Like there's the statement that like orcs were elves once, but they were corrupted, and that corruption is the source of their affinity for evil and evil acts. It's not it's not that they are nefarious because of some intellectual leader that they had that said we should all be evil. It's literally something where magic has happened that has caused them to do bad things, and that's the source of the conflict. Like if you get rid of the ability of magic to like affect people's minds and stuff like that, then you lose a lot of the possibilities to make stories. And that's really what a lot of is going on here, is that what happens with these like hypersensitive people when they try to write stories is that everything is restricted out of usefulness until there's no actual good stories that can be made with the building blocks they're allowed.
Well, yeah, it's if I mean, I can't attribute the intelligence to see it this way to the individuals that act in propping these things up, but there is definitely a hint of like the people who form these ideas and put them out there for the, let's call them the useful idiots to employ.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in the world that don't want certain stories told, because there's definitely
yeah.
I mean, you and I have been through this with about a million other things. This is just another form of people trying to take away the ability to fight against socialist propaganda by removing storytelling abilities from everything.
Yeah, I mean,
and there's a lot of people that will think that I'm crazy for saying that, but it is quite literally infesting everything at this point. At some point, people need to be able to see it and just be like, you can't tell certain stories anymore with the way these things are set up. And those certain stories that you can't tell are the ones that, say, promote individualism or suggest that you can get things done on merit.
Well, or even simpler things like that. Like, there's that meme of like, okay, we're making a movie, And like they're like, okay, we're gonna have this white guy act. We're gonna have this white guy character shoot this black guy character. Oh, you can't do that. Why? Because racist. Okay, then we'll have it be a black guy character shoot the black guy character. Oh, you can't do that either. Racist. Okay, then I guess we'll have a white guy character shoot a white guy character. And they're like, no, you can't do that. Racism. And you're like, okay, we'll have a black guy character shoot a white guy character. Okay, you can't do that. Racism. Well, you've just taken out the possibility of having any of these characters have interesting interactions, and yet at the same time, there's the demand that these characters be in these protected classes, be put into stories where they then can't actually interact with the story in a meaningful way, right? Like they have to be protected in the story as well.
Yeah. So you lose all storytelling ability. Like if you want to portray the struggles a person might have, mm-hmm. you can't do that anymore because you can't tell that story.
It's getting there, yeah.
Wrong to even tell that story. So, what story do you tell at that point?
But there's
do you
also
tell a story about a bunch of orcs that are hanging out on a mesa and watch the party go by and just sort of wave and offer them tips on CrossFit?
Hey, don't eat the purple cactus. It's bad for you.
And the worst part is, it's like I'm looking at these orcs, and did you notice that, like, they de-uglified them for the most part, like not completely, because some of them are still like.
Well, I mean, there are artistic reasons why you might do that, but the reason that this has been done is not like the reason that a normal actual artist would, right?
Well, no, they're being
neutered.
Yeah, they've de-uglified the orcs because now they're good guys, which means that the ugly orcs, they were never good in your mind to begin with. Is that? I mean, you can have an ugly character that's a good guy. So why did you change their?
Well, no, there can be no distinction between ugliness and beauty because beauty must be destroyed.
But then why did they de-uglify the orcs?
Because they aren't good thinkers. That's why.
Yeah, there's definitely that.
I mean,
oh god, and the pretension. It reeks of such pretension as well.
Well, all of this stuff reeks of pretension because all of it is an attempt by an anti-talented person to make themselves feel better than talented and untalented people.
Yeah. Like, give me the untalented person that gives me something goofy any day over
not even goofy, just something solid, just like someone who tells a solid story. And does it with plain language. Give me a Hemingway. I can get by without a Milton, but give me a Hemingway. Give me a Rex Stout. These are people who had talents certainly for telling stories, but didn't do so in like pretentious language, right?
Yeah.
And didn't do so with the intention of trying to like necessarily force the reader to think a certain way. And did so with openness to the possibility of other cultural things that they might find abhorrent, but like still exist and need to be discussed and can be a part of a story. Like, imagine putting a bullfight into a story these days and not making it sound like this horrible evil thing that is just evil, right? Like, imagine putting a bullfight into a story and having it be like portrayed as morally neutral or something like that, or as an important cultural artifact, right? You couldn't do it, or I mean, you could do it, but you would get flack from every direction that I guess people shouldn't care about anymore. Ideally,
yeah, which more and more the independent publishing scene is sort of helping to solve that problem. It's still a battle. There's always going to be the how far into the future is it before Microsoft Word quite literally won't let you write certain stories? And
well, it already is doing that.
Well, yeah, we've already had a case where Google Docs locked someone out of writing.
No. There's. Oh my goodness, you don't know about this? Like,
is it the software that was like correcting terminology in grammar structure for certain politically correct things that came out a few years ago, or is it something new?
No. There's. Hold on. Let me see if I can.
I mean, these are all the things that are not even at the back of my mind when I'm writing. When I'm writing, it's like I have a story idea. This is where I want the story to go. That's what I'm putting down. All of this political correctness and
Yeah, there's new spell
whatever.
check AI. There's new spell check AI for Microsoft Word, new as of 6 years ago, that will look for phrases that may be hard to understand by or might be offensive to someone in another country or culture, says Microsoft.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that
so
is what I was thinking of.
yeah, this is a yeah. The article that I'm looking at is in Fast Company from 2019, but you will use artificial intelligence to make your writing not just grammatically but politically correct. Ideas in Word. Say you write, we need to get some fresh blood in here. The AI is likely to underline fresh blood and suggest new employees. It will change mailman to mail person and congressman to congressperson. Stuff like that.
So zero attempt at all at being outside of the box of anything. It's
It's still optional, I guess, is the one positive to this, but slightly.
I mean, this is Microsoft we're talking about. It doesn't stay optional for long.
No.
I was listening. I believe it was Lunduke I was listening to, and he was going through the software that he thought was as he put it, it's like here's the least woke software, and he defined woke as these companies literally tell you to your face that they hate you, and then sell you software.
Right.
And when it got to word processors, he couldn't really come up with anything. He was like, Microsoft Word is bad, Google is bad.
Yeah.
He even said that LibreOffice, while it's not bad, the people that are now in charge of it, they've pushed out the people that used to be in charge of it in lieu of, they've kind of defunded it and everything, essentially.
Yeah.
And so he can't even, with a clear conscience, recommend that. His two best recommendations, the only ones he had, in fact, were, funnily enough, Apple's writing suite. And he said, but you're forced to use Apple products, which are a product that are made by someone who tells you they hate you.
Right.
And then he also said that your best bet, especially if you're on Linux, get an old version of Microsoft Word from like early 2000. That was his absolute best offer that he could make, because I mean, I have spent years looking for better word processors, and for some reason nobody wants to make them. He's right, though. There's not that many options. I mean, there's still OpenOffice, which, nothing's really going to change with that going forward.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to continually update LibreOffice if you don't feel like it, so.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, LibreOffice and OpenOffice have always been my two favorite options. I have used the Apple one before, and it was pretty decent, but I wouldn't say that it was anything that jumped out at me.
Yeah.
There's... we talked about some of the other options like Scrivener before.
Yeah,
I don't know anything about those companies though.
So,
yeah.
No, I mean, you just the thing about LibreOffice is that it's open source. So, if you get angry about it, you can always go further back in the open source and pick an earlier version or something. Little more irritating to do in Linux, because Linux has a tendency to want to just update everything.
Yeah.
But if you're smart about it, you can do it. And the thing about LibreOffice is that what they haven't done is they haven't made things less customizable. And so even if they update something that you don't like, you can usually choose an option that makes it go away or turn back into the thing that you do like. So.
Yeah, so I mean, my thoughts on this, for ever since I heard about everything going on with Wizards of the Coast, my thoughts have been, look, everybody just either take the old stuff and use it and don't give these companies any more money, or make your own stuff. And when someone comes up with something that is as good as or better than the old D&D stuff, put it out there and make a fortune off of it, because these people aren't even going to be competition.
Yeah. Well, you can always write in LaTeX.
Yeah. There's actually a lot of markup language programs too, so you don't even have to go as far as learning all of LaTeX to be able to do that.
No one learns all of LaTeX.
Yeah, there's a lot of markup language word processors on phones, and it has been tempting in the past couple of years to just be like, you know what, I've wanted to write on my phone ever since the days of BlackBerry where I could, and they took that away from me.
Yeah.
I might actually start using one of the markup writing programs. I mean, Google Docs is right out. I did it once. I don't think it worked too well, and on top of that, now, there's only one story I'm aware of, but one is enough sometimes. There was an author who got locked out of her Google account because of the story she was writing. Google deemed it inappropriate and locked her out of her account, and
Yeah.
I don't know if she was ever even able to get back into it, but it was in the middle of a book she was writing.
Right.
And
Well,
shame on her, of course, for keeping the thing in the cloud.
That's the problem with
But
the cloud. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
but still, it's like that's the kind of people you're dealing with. You never know when you're going to be the one, caught in that web. So avoid the spiders.
Yeah, avoid
at
the
all
web
costs.
itself as much as you can, because that's what Google will do to you.
I mean, you've seen the stuff I write. Google. I am amazed that Google didn't can everything I wrote about the good guy on Google Docs back in the day. I had backups, of course, but even so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough about the case that you're talking about to know why they suspended her account or whatever. But like, your stuff is tame enough that I don't think that they could make that justification. I mean, if they did it, it would be because there was some spiteful person at Google that deliberately targeted you in particular, and I'm not ruling that out as a possibility, but it is kind of self-important to believe that there is such a person.
But it's all ammunition to point out that it's like, look, there's a clear direction that software companies are going in, and that direction is not so much thought control, but output control.
Yeah,
they view themselves as some kind of gatekeeper of what is allowed to be presented to the public, and unfortunately for them, the technology exists that allows us to skirt all of that. But it's unfortunate for us that most people just don't want to take initiative on that. So,
well, I mean, it's one of those things where you can tell people until you're blue in the face, but a lot of people just don't care.
Yeah, and I mean, 90% of people would listen to this, and when I got to the part about how this all relates to socialist propaganda, they'd immediately be thinking in terms of, oh, here's the tinfoil hat people. But it's like, there's a history to this. There's a known history to this. You can read about this stuff, and there's quite literally history books that tell you what happened in communist Russia and how they controlled information.
Yeah, so, information control is a big deal because that's like 50% of how propaganda works is by producing and repeating a desired narrative and by suppressing all alternative narratives.
Yeah, and it would be nice to say that, everyone likes to think of themselves as being immune to it. It would be nice to say that more people thought about it enough to... I mean, most of the people in America during voting season, when they watch a political opponent being slammed by the person they want to vote for in some footage that's clearly only 3 seconds clipped out of a speech, almost all the voters are not going to look up that full speech to confirm whether or not what was said was in the proper context.
Yeah.
But at the same time, 90% of the time, what they said was taken out of context.
Sure. Well, I mean, I've had this hit me pretty hard specifically. Did I ever tell you about this?
No. I don't know.
Do you remember that? Do you remember that video that was going viral here and there? It was Klaus Schwab saying he was afraid of libertarians.
Yes, I think we talked about that at some point.
Yeah. So there's this video going around, and it's from a speech by Klaus Schwab, and it was going around and it went viral, and it's like Klaus Schwab was talking about how there's these libertarians that blah 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 blah. They want to reduce the order of that we fought so hard for, and blah 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 blah. They want to get out of these systems that we've designed to hold on to them. And, everybody's like, wow, look at this guy talking about how afraid he is of libertarians. And no one linked to the whole speech. Nobody. Not a single person that could I find linked to the whole speech. They linked to like some little clip that was picked up and watermarked by some other person on Twitter. And that's that little, 15-second clip spread around the internet like hotcakes. It was crazy. I spent hours trying to figure out where the hell this speech came from. And I found it. And that's the worst part. Because this thing went viral in like 2023. It was like, whoa, look at how much power libertarians must be, improving their reach. Because like he's talking about this in 2023 and something happened and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, you're going to love this. The speech in question took place in 2017. And the context of the clip in question is that Klaus Schwab was talking about Donald Trump, which is wrong on several levels. In the sense that, number one, he was basically saying that Donald Trump is the leader of libertarianism, which is not true or accurate. And
or close.
Number two, he was basically saying that like it's Trump that threatens our hold on civilization. He didn't mean actual libertarians. He just meant Donald Trump. Then the best part, the even better part, is that he gave this speech in 2017, and in 2018 he gave a nearly identical speech talking about the difficulties that faced their agenda in 2018, and Donald Trump and libertarianism were not mentioned. So yeah, it's number one. It shows that he was never afraid of actual libertarians to begin with. Number two, it also shows that by 2018, they were convinced that Donald Trump was not going to be a significant anything more than a minor speed bump in their agenda.
Yeah,
it's really beautiful because that one video went viral, but like the debunk of it, and I tried, man. I was like, no, guys, you're getting taken in by propaganda here. This isn't what you think it is. And like everybody's like, no, but look at the video. I'm like, oh god.
And the libertarians let their guard down so much that Chase Oliver is now their candidate.
Basically, yes.
So, good on ya. Good on ya.
Congratulations.
Exactly. I don't think I want to delve into the political situation, but I know exactly what you mean with that kind of stuff. Because it's like the reverse of what you usually expect. Usually you're expecting, oh, this guy said something and it's taken out of context, and what he said is actually not the bad thing that it was meant to be. But this is the reverse. What he said is actually worse in the right context than it was in the wrong context. But it was enough to get many libertarians to lower their guard and be like, see,
basically.
we're winning.
And their standards.
Yeah. And they really did. I mean, like, the point that they, Dave Smith not running for president, or for the nomination, that was not, him choosing to leave was not the time for everyone to say, all right, then I'm out too.
Right.
But it happened. But anyway, like I said, we'll save that for the other channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, this idea in writing that you need to restrict the writer in what they are and are not allowed to say. Like Wizards of the Coast is their own company. If that's the route they want to go, more power to them and the grave they are digging for themselves.
Correct.
I'll hand them the shovel. I don't care. I think that this is definitely one of those things that, at some point there's probably already not enough people giving them money for this to continue, because when you really think about it, were the type of people they're trying to appeal to the people that were playing D&D to begin with? I suspect not.
Some of them probably like here's the thing, right? Like I'm sure there are plenty of, woke people that play Dungeons and Dragons, but like it doesn't make sense to restrict your market that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially if you already had a subset of them playing it.
Well, because there are ways to do this where you don't close off possibilities. You just open up new ones, right? Like you don't have to you don't have to make it so that orcs are friendly green people in order to, like, you could say hey, there's this tribe of orcs that splintered off from the main tribe of orcs, and they've through some kind of divine intervention they got rid of the element that was corrupting their minds, and now they're at least amenable to good. And you could actually make a pretty interesting story out of that. People have done it before with similar settings and elements to the story, but that's not what they did. What they did is they said, no more evil races. In fact, they got rid of the term races altogether. But they've basically rather than opening a door, they've closed. Rather than opening a window, they've closed a door.
Yeah, and just to make the joke that Wizards of the Coast made of themselves, it is entirely possible to say, yeah, these orcs, they splintered off from the other evil orcs, and they decided that they were all about tacos and siestas now. So,
well, I mean, you could just make it so that, like there's all kinds of cool mythological, ideas that show up in Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like, in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, there's no reason why you couldn't expand something and create a new faction, as opposed to eliminating an old one.
It's an endless world of dungeons that a group of heroes could stumble upon and be like, "Oh, we've discovered an entirely new society here."
Yeah,
it's in the name. It's Dungeons and Dragons, and I kind of don't want to hear what they did with the concept of dragons, because I feel like they're probably working on screwing that up too. But I mean, I'm checked out of it anyway, so I guess I don't care.
Well, I mean, dragons are another, race that was, at least some colors of dragons were innately evil, and probably they're not anymore.
I was always looking at those dragons and like, yep, that's definitely Polish people right there.
Yeah, I mean,
those are Polish coded dragons we're looking at.
I don't know, the whole concept of coding.
No, coding is quite literally something that only exists in the head of the person that calls something coded.
Well, you can make an allegory. You can write an allegory, in which case you are somewhere deep in your mind you're coding something. But what seems to happen is not that the author says, "Oh yeah, I coded this for this because this is the allegory I wanted to write about." What seems to happen is that the writer writes something, and then some person says, "This is X-coded," and then everybody else says, "Yeah, this looks X-coded to me too," and the author's just like, "Whatever, I don't care. I'm writing something else now." And so what happens is that there's no actual pushback against this notion that, but say there's very little actual pushback as to this notion that, hey, this is what the author intended, and then it becomes kind of the big lie that turns into truth, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. A lot of people don't like to celebrate the small victories because they're like, well, these are people that have jobs and everything, and it sucks that they don't have work anymore. But there's a couple of things that, for one thing, when you see the writing on the wall that badly and you stick around for that long, you have no one to blame but yourself.
Well, there's a difference between someone losing their job because the company that they work for went under or downsized, and hounding a person and trying to ensure that no one employs them ever again, ever, anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And these are two different phenomena, and one of them seems to happen in one direction and the other one happens in the other direction, and this is not the same thing.
Well, yeah, the tendency for someone to not be able to get a job in other places because people are hounding them, that is usually just someone that's like, look, I just wrote a thing, I'm just doing my job, and now I'm going to try and do another job, quit harassing me.
Right.
But, the people that lose their jobs because they're like, we know better than everyone else and we know what people should think, and then they make a crappy product, and all of a sudden they're crying because, everyone hates us, and that's why we aren't making money anymore. No, you kind of had it coming.
Yeah.
It's this better than thou attitude that you have. Nobody's going to be sympathetic to that.
The thing is that they can fix they have reaped the results of their actions in creating a bad product, and if they want to redeem themselves, all they need to do is create a good product. The problem is that all of their minds are so self-restricted, bound in so many different straitjackets of victimhood that they will never be able to create a good story.
Yeah, and we've seen with several companies that they have had every opportunity to turn this around, and they usually just dug themselves in deeper. I'm not going to name names, Ubisoft, but I mean, there is that too.
True, very true.
I think I made a noise there in the middle of a sentence that
came. It was a cough. It's fine.
Yeah, a set of syllables that may or may not have sounded similar to something that.
No, it was just a cough.
It was a cough.
It was a cough.
That's about all that's left of them, at least. Just an unheard voice on the wind, soon to be bought out by Tencent. I mean, you can't write. You cannot write fiction at this point that is outdoing reality in how ridiculous some of this is.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, like, you could, but it'd be like seen as like satire.
A company tried to propaganda so hard that they're being bought out by an entire country of propaganda.
Yeah. Isn't it great?
I mean, in a weird way, it's a thing of beauty. It's just like, I don't know quite how to phrase it, but it's almost like there's some sick and twisted order to the universe that, because of how sick and twisted it is, and still manages to work out.
No,
for
it's
certain
really,
people.
really, really simple, actually. It's just that they created products that intentionally hated the target audiences for those products. It's really that simple.
I'm fascinated by the haircuts of these orcs.
Yeah, right? Well, you gotta have the side shave. Everybody has to have a side shave.
They've all got their wall razors, apparently. I don't know how they're cutting their hair like this.
I don't know. It's just, it's very simple. Like
the boy in this picture has a lacrosse stick.
Yeah, it's very weirdly like yeah, it's definitely Spanish / Mexican. It's very weird. And like, you could totally do a story like this, but like someone made a piece of art, and then it got spun out into like, okay, the whole world has to be like this now.
Well,
which is not how you do fantasy.
I think it's kind of funny that like I'm assuming that this leans heavily Mexican more so than Spanish, just based on
that's
some of the look and some of the countryside, especially. I mean,
but like Mexican culture has as its base, Spain and the Aztecs, and this is definitely closer to Spanish than Aztec.
But what I'm seeing here is, assuming that the basis is leaning a little bit more Mexican, horses came from Europe.
Yeah.
And so they've already been colonialized?
Well, no, I mean, I think... Well, no, I mean, the guy on the horse looks like he could be like Don Quixote, right?
Yeah.
It's the Spanish part of the culture of Mexico. Because
what if it's a cultural divide within the orc community? Like, only the ones that were Spanish based get horses, and that's why the rest of them don't have it. But we don't. But it's a different word. It's not Spanish. It's like some other country that exists in this strangely similar D&D world. That
I also like the idea of orcs being falconers.
Yeah. But are they falconers, or is that just how they're keeping the one that's on the tip of the mesa fed?
There's multiple of them. There's the fat lady that's holding one. There's Don Quixote that's welcoming one to his falconry gloved hand. There's the girl in the front that has one perched on her hand. And then under the mesa, there's a dude on a horse with like two more of them behind him.
Yeah, it's the orc falcon cohabitation.
It would be cool to create a fantasy race that is a race of falconers, but like, this is a fairly significant shift in...
those falcons are very slave coded.
Well, like, so far, thankfully, PETA appears to be so abysmally inept at passing around its own message that they haven't quite infiltrated Wizards of the Coast yet.
But it'll be funny when it happens.
Yeah, right?
And nothing is better than watching weirdos devour each other in real time.
Yeah, it's funny because, like, it could be a different setting, but what they did is they said this is the setting, and the old settings are no longer valid. Which is just, like, that's the part that bugs me. Because it's like...
Yeah, no, that is the problem, though.
Let people tell a new type of story as well, and let people tell new stories with the old pieces too. Like, there's no reason to restrict them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
But I guess it is Wizards of the Coast. Don't they ban cards all the time in Magic the Gathering?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like we have to point out that this isn't a problem in and of itself. The problem is that they want to delete their own history of the product for the people who have been supporting the product for all this time, and they're going to expect that these people stick around. I don't think that's going to happen.
No, I mean, that's why you go to the secondary market and you pick up the old, 3rd and 4th edition books, and you just play with those.
Yeah, I mean, I never even made it that far. I never got past second edition. I never really played that much, but if I were to go back, I would just be buying the old second edition stuff anyway. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like I mean, just judging by the things that I've heard about here and there, it doesn't look like it's working out well for Wizards of the Coast. I would assume that most of their money is from Magic the Gathering at this point, because I don't know if D&D is doing it for them.
Yeah.
But there's
Yeah, I
definitely
don't
been
know.
a good amount of outrage over it, and people just saying, you know what, I'm done. So we'll see.
It'd be nice to have a good fantasy setting for, role playing, but like we haven't had one for a long time, it seems like.
Well, I mean, I don't know how the other ones that I know there were always the GURPS. Those were never very popular. I know there
Yeah.
because those covered everything. I mean, Discworld had them, and
Mhm.
I guess I just don't know enough different ones to name anymore. But there was a Discworld one,
Yeah.
and there's definitely like the majority of these are fantasy settings. These player handbook style tabletop role playing game things.
Mhm.
They usually take place in these heavily like fantastic fantasy lower technology sort of worlds,
Yeah.
because there's just something exciting about the idea that, especially a world with very little projectile and infantry ability to do combat, like these people aren't
Mhm.
running around in tanks carrying revolvers. They don't have a lot of distance that they can work with in their combat, and so the wars that happen in these worlds tend to be much more exciting than they would be if you were fighting them with drones, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's a big part of why people are drawn to this kind of thing so much, because it makes it a little bit more exciting that you have a group of characters traveling through a forest, and if they are in danger, they have to let that danger get incredibly close to be able to deal with it.
Oh, that's a really good point, actually. Yeah.
I mean, there are sci-fi campaigns like this, but usually people are changing the rules of how the danger quotient in it is working. Like if you do a space fantasy one, you're probably doing your combat in little ships or giant battle fleets, or
Mhm.
you're on a planet with phasers and the people. There's usually a lot of open spaces just because it's more industrial,
Yeah.
and I mean, even in books that place sci-fi characters in forest settings, it tends to be less dangerous for them when they've got a lot of cover and they've got projectile weapons.
Yeah.
Here we just have bows and arrows that can't really travel too far, so that's the best we've got. And then there's magic, which also creates, the magic wouldn't be as much of a threat in a world where people could just fire a pistol at a wizard's head.
Yeah.
Now that said, if I recall, there's actually a lot of like D&D cowboy settings where they do have guns, but I don't know enough about it. I'm assuming that there is some, because they have like
No,
the
no,
ninja
it can be
ones.
done. I mean, certainly there are, plenty of different tabletop or computerized role playing systems that allow you to have guns. I just thought that your point about the fact that you have to let the danger get really close to you was a really good point
Yeah,
from like a writing perspective. Yeah.
I mean that's how I always viewed it when I wanted to do fantasy. It's like, okay, the danger can be a lot more extreme because it has to be closer now.
Right.
Like, it's the reason Ray Peril didn't just take everything out with his guns, because at some point I was moving the danger closer and closer to them.
Well, it's not just that too, but like the danger is also a lot more personal in that sense, right? Like there's always the story of like the guy who is just walking, through the jungle and just gets shot in the head by a sniper from a couple hundred yards away, and the sniper doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know who the sniper is. They don't even see him. They don't know what happened, and all they have to do is and then they all just have to take cover. That's very detached. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Although I mean, it would be interesting to have a party of like a classic D&D party of warriors and rogues and mages suddenly find themselves under sniper fire and have to figure out what to do about it.
Sure.
I mean, because even a dragon is like, okay, they still have to figure out what to do about it. It's still a big danger, and
Yeah, encounters are kind of in the 30-foot range at max, kind of thing.
yeah, but it's like you still know the dragon is there.
Yeah.
With the sniper, it's just like, why did our warrior just fall over? What's this hole in his head? What's going on?
What's that? What was that sound? Yeah.
Pew! That's actually the reason I liked the anime Gate so much.
Uh-huh.
It was just kind of... It was kind of refreshing to see a bit of an honest take on what would happen in this situation.
Yeah, that was a pretty good show. It was one of those ones that I think their license ran out, so like they went to like one particular place or something like that. I don't remember. But it was a good show.
I had actually watched... Do you remember the part in The Good Guy where the martial arts monks started attacking all the heroes at the end, and it was like the military people with General Kiern and Lieutenant Lucy just like slugs one in the face with a pair of brass knuckles, and she's just like, "What do they think? Do they think we can't fight or something?" Because you always have this like, it's like, I love martial arts, and I'll always put them on a tier above anything military. But you always have these things where it's like, here's the martial arts guy, and he's just taking out all these military people like it's nothing. It's like, no, a lot of them do actually know how to fight, believe it or not.
Well, it's not so. There's a lot of like mythology behind martial arts. Like there's a bunch of people who are like, oh yeah, I can hit people with my ki, and it works really well with their students, but it doesn't work really well with like a boxer
or virtually anyone else.
Yeah,
I did that whole scene in that story because of Gate, the scene at the end where the girl puts on the brass knuckles and they just beat up the one dude's son, because it's like, yeah, he did this horrible thing. This is his punishment. He's gonna take it like a man.
Yeah.
It was just a fantastic show from that perspective. I mean, it opens up with a guy you're just thinking he's a normal protagonist for an anime, and then it's like, no, this guy's like a ranger-trained murder machine.
Yeah.
Yeah, for anyone who hasn't seen it, Gate is a story about a fantasy world that... a portal opens up between Earth in Japan and a fantasy world, and the Japanese military crosses over into the fantasy world, and anytime the people in the fantasy world try to give them trouble, they annihilate them with superior firepower.
It is extremely well written JSDF propaganda.
Yeah, it is definitely propaganda, but it's really, really fun to watch because
it's really good propaganda. Like there are a lot of anime shows that are like that, where like you're like, wow, this is really good, but it's also propaganda.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of that. Like Angel Beats. Angel Beats is a show that you watch and you're like, wow, this is really cool, and the characters are really well written, and there's a lot of emotional stuff going on, and you're like, oh, this is propaganda for organ donation.
Yeah.
and like, that's a thing, but like at the same time, like some of the most effective propaganda is effective because it also has good story elements. So this is one of the failings that the mecha orcs seem to also have, is that they can create propaganda, but they can't create good story beats behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I was rooting for the JSDF in Gate, even though, like, so it was a very diplomatic show. Like there was a lot of, they would go in and they would talk to these leaders of these tribes and kingdoms and armies, and they'd be like, look, let's all try to work out some kind of deal. And then the armies would be like, no, we're going to force you out of the lands. And so they would attack the people from Earth and get mowed down at a distance where they couldn't even fight back.
Right.
But then it was like, they would have problems with dragons, and so the JSDF would move in and take out a dragon, and they'd all be like, they just took out a dragon. Holy crap. We shouldn't mess with these
They
people.
just had one guy take out a dragon.
Yeah. Really, really good fantasy story. And
yeah.
But like, with these orcs, I'm kind of rooting for a generic D&D party to just come through and destroy their entire culture.
I mean, the thing about orcs is that they never really had, like, because they've been twisted to evil by a divine, intervention. They never really had like a real culture, so to speak. Like they had loosely fitting together bands of armed warriors, but like, I don't know. I guess I don't know enough about
they have
D&D
it now.
orcs, but I'm thinking of like Tolkien.
They have culture now, and their culture is one of child sacrifice and sacrificing yourself and your enemies to gods after a victorious battle.
So you're going Aztec with this now?
Oh, of course. I mean, that's like the best outcome I can think of for what I'm looking at right now. If
I
this
mean,
is
you could
actually
do that. That could work.
if this is actually an Aztecan culture with falconers, then I could see it working, because at least it creates some conflict. Like, at least a passing party would be like, oh, things are pretty cool here, and then as they're on their way out, they're like, wait, are those child sacrifices over there? What's going on? What's that slab for?
Well, no, they get invited to play like a game of sports, and they lose, and they're like, well, that was a fun game, and they're like, yep, cool, you're going to be the sacrifices now, and they're like, what?
Huh?
Oh, we got to get out of this situation.
I don't know why I thought of the Final Fantasy battle music. It's like, so you're the sacrifices now, and then you just hear that.
Yep.
I mean, I guess some of it can work.
No, this is the thing, right? All of this can work. The problem is that these companies, what they're doing with their settings, is that they're moving them in one direction and cutting off the ability to do anything that was along another direction that they had been going until just now, right? Like, when you're creating it's okay. So to give a technical allegory here, one of the reasons that I don't like Ubuntu, the Linux distribution, is because the GUI system that they use, one of the guys in it is like, yeah, I'm just going to start taking away functionality because I don't think it's worthwhile functionality. I'm like, you're the creator of an operating system. Your operating system, your goal is not to say my workflow is the only reasonable workflow, and therefore people with other workflows, I'm going to cut off their ability to continue with those workflows, right? You don't get to take away functionality. If you take away functionality, you're a bad OS designer or programmer or whatever. And this is the same thing, only with stories. They say, okay, we have all these stories dating back, 20, 30, 40 years. Like, when did the Dragonlance novels come out? Stuff like that. 1980s, something like that. It's like, we've created all these stories, and now what we're saying is that you may not use any of these parts of this setting anymore. We've decided that these parts of the setting are bad, and that no good stories can come from them, and therefore we are restricting them from your use. And because we have, the power of, copyright and trademark law behind us, we can enforce this, or rather, we can get the government to enforce this for us, to at least some degree, which means that, like, people actually have to listen to these, petty tyrants say, yeah, you can't have stories with evil orcs anymore. It's very, irritating from a storytelling perspective.
Yeah, but it's also like, it's psychotic. It is absolutely psychotic, because the things that they can enforce, they might try, but this is not going to affect anyone at the player level who's just like, yeah, I'm getting together with my friends and we're doing it the way we want. Try and stop us. I mean,
well, no, but like, the thing about it is that there's, if they start taking, imagine that they start taking rules out of the rule book, say, like, everybody complains about the grappling rules, and what if they just said, you know what, nobody can grapple anymore. We've taken grappling out of D&D. You can't do it. It just can't be done. Well, what do you mean? What do you mean you can't grapple anymore? We've removed the rules entirely. You've actually lost something there, and you've made it harder, because the person who wants to play with his friends and include grappling now has to come up with their own original grappling rules, or they have to go and buy another book to get the old grappling rules and use those, right?
Well, it's kind of the point that, like that's the point I want to make, though, is the old rules still exist, so people still don't have to come up with their own when this stuff happens. The thing about it is, if you continue to make a product that nobody's going to want, there isn't going to be a new player base that's going to have to hunt for this stuff. You're just going to have the player base that already has a lot of the old stuff and are more than willing to share it because they've been snubbed. So, I mean, I guarantee you, at this very moment, there are people like, yeah, I'll run you off some copies of my D&D stuff so you can get some proper rules to play with instead of whatever hot mess this tamale fest over here is.
I mean, let's not disparage tamales. Tamales are delicious.
Tamales are quite literally one of my top 3 favorite foods.
Yes.
Mexican food is actually my favorite food. Tamales are my favorite food, and it is the best word for what I wanted to use there. This is the tamale fest of D&D, because it is utterly and obscenely racist that they looked at orcs first and said, these are black people, and then said, let's make them Mexican. Especially when we are at a time where innocent Japanese artists that used a slightly off shade of skin color for a character that they decided to draw are being harassed and attacked on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't understand how you made this leap. Like,
it's really simple, actually. They made it a horrible crime to wear blackface, and then they just turned it around and made the other way also a horrible crime.
Yeah. Well, like, more in terms of these orcs.
Sure.
Like, the people that made this couldn't even be bothered to really come up with a culture for the orcs when they wanted to do this. They were just like, yeah, let's just make them Mexicans. Just throw a little bit of Don Quixote in there.
There's a question as to how original any of this is ever going to be, but like, especially something made in a corporate setting. It's a question of what people. This is just one drawing, right?
Yeah.
Who knows what actually is being written in like the books and stuff like that.
And who knows what the players will make of it in the end. I mean, maybe something will happen where this becomes like the most popular D&D ever. I don't know. It's possible.
The thing is that you could make this good, but you can make evil orcs interesting too.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to restrict it so that you can only have one and not the other.
Except
or rather, there are reasons, but they're bad reasons.
And I feel like this has defined a lot of the literary and movie culture for the past 15 years. Is just like everything is like not even morally gray. It's just like there's not really any evil, so we have to eliminate anything that implies that there is evil, and we just have to make the conflicts come from silly things. Like I remember there was that era where I think it was the folks from Clownfish TV kept pointing out that every single cartoon seems to have a prom episode for no reason. like She-Ra, the cartoon, had a prom episode. Why were there schools where they could have a prom in She-Ra? I don't understand it.
Why were any of the characters involved? Yeah. Well, this is one of those things where I wonder if it's like a revenge thing. Like there were people there were people who like didn't get to go to their prom, and they're very angry about that, and so they want to like take over things and put proms in them that they can control, something like that.
Yeah, and it gets to my final point that I want to make about this, which is that this is all stemming from a severe lack of maturity on the part of the people that do these things.
That's a good point.
They are not people that can handle conflict well. They are not people that can handle being told that their worldview isn't the worldview everyone else has to share.
Right.
They can't handle that there are differences of thought. They can't handle that cultural differences don't necessarily imply that there has to be any sort of hatred towards other people.
Right.
And the worst aspect of it is that they really can't handle the idea that these cultures can mix and mix well, and people can be perfectly happy with them, which is kind of where America's been at for 100 years. I mean, it is a giant mix of multiple cultures to the extent that no other place in the world, like the Europeans like to brag that they can go to 5 different countries in a day and eat 5 different types of food. I can do that by walking down the block in a suburb in America. You want Thai food, it's like a 2-minute drive. You want Indian food, 7-minute drive. You want Japanese food, 4-minute drive. Anything you want, you can get right now in America. I think the hardest thing to find in my area is Korean food. That's a 10-minute drive.
Yeah.
It's like, and food is the single biggest thing that is shared between cultures. Because people want to try new things, and they find things they like, and so they continue to enjoy them. And if you're one of those people that is from a different culture but enjoys Korean food, you're probably going to have Korean food every so often. it's the easiest thing to share between cultures. The next would probably be certain words from language or certain tools and technological advances. And, of course, the big one, stories.
Yep.
Next to food, stories are probably the biggest thing that are shared between cultures.
And stories have a longer expiration date.
Yeah. God willing, they do.
God willing, indeed.
Yeah, there are definitely some of them that it's like, yeah, I wouldn't. I can just flush this one away. I'm good.
Yeah, but surströmming.
Yeah.
All right. I guess that's an episode then.
Yeah. Hey, can I just point out one more thing before we go?
Sure.
I know that the people that would be listening to this can't see what we're seeing, but the axe that this orc woman is carrying with her, like, Jill Valentine blazer style jacket and cargo pants.
She's like a weird combination of Leon Kennedy from Resident Evil 4 and Jill Valentine from Resident Evil 2.
Yeah. The axe that she's carrying is so much more of like a fantasy D&D axe than everything else in this image, which is more tailor-made for this Spanish, Aztec, Mexican amalgamation. And it really kind of, I don't know. It
stands out.
Yeah, it stands out big time. So yeah, I think that covers just about way more than needed to be said on this subject, because whatever's going to happen is going to happen. That's what it comes down to. Like, well,
the thing is that people are finally starting to make their own stuff again, because there's a time where people were just like kind of grudgingly going along with it, and there was a time where like, they were like, I don't like this, but let's just play Dungeons and Dragons. But now people are finally starting to make like, their own versions of this stuff a little bit more. And hopefully we just see more of that. More competition, more new stuff, and more open like ways to like, hey, here, you can make a bunch of different stories with these ideas. Go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, here's hoping that it works out for the best. I mean, it seems to have worked out in video games pretty well. The indie market exploded amidst all these top companies that can't seem to make a decent game to save their lives.
Right. Yeah, it's the game industry is something we should probably talk about at some point, but maybe in a different episode.
Yeah. I always start to lose track of the fact that we have to swing it back around to writing, so...
Well, I mean, we don't have to. It's just that, like, it'd be nice to,
Well, I mean, we're called the Wordy Pair, so if we yammer on incessantly, I see no problem with that.
Then you got what you signed up for.
Yeah, you knew what you were getting into when you bought those tickets. I say let
You knew
crash.
what this was.
Did you ever see the Team 4-star Dragon Ball dub?
Yes.
Where Cell's just like, you know what I'm about.
All right. Well, thanks for watching, or thanks for listening, everybody. We are the Wordy Pair. I'm Rudy.
And I'm Justin. And thanks for totally letting me end it on a Dragon Ball note. You're editing this out, aren't you?
Head chala.
Thanks for listening to the Wordy Pair Podcast. Our passion is all things writing, world building, and getting into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We hope you enjoyed our unique takes. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to get your weekly dose of writing weirdness. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on Twitter. For Rudy, it's @Rudolph_Cone. And for Justin, @Ninja Mouse Chew. See you next time on the Wordy Pair Podcast.